Okay. John, are we on?
Okay, we are set.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. This is a continuation of the board meeting that we had on Monday evening, where we took a motion that was approved to recess. So we've recessed for about 45 hours now, and we're back here. And I think to resume the meeting, we have to formally have a motion to, I guess,
I make a
resume the meeting.
motion. I make a motion to resume the meeting.
So moved.
And I'll second it. So all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the meeting is now back in session. Again,
Any
after,
opposed?
yeah,
Any opposed?
even if you're opposed, you're outnumbered. So again, after about a 45-minute recess, we are back in meeting again. We've been joined by a couple more of our board reps, Paige Benning and Olivia Welsh. Morgan is here as well, and I don't know if Alex is going to join or not. But again, to continue Monday's meeting, we had some unfinished business that we needed to resolve with respect to the district's fall reopening plans, and more specifically about the options that are being presented for parents and students, both at the K through 5 as well as the 6 through 12 level. Before we get into the meat of that discussion, we had, as we recessed on Monday, we were in the midst of board comments, and I had a request from Marshall to maybe wrap up a few more board comments before we get into the main part of tonight's meeting. So, Marshall, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, at the end of the meeting during board comments, one of our student reps, Morgan, made a statement. And I think that by the time we got to those comments, it was late in the evening, and there were a lot of people who had logged off at that point. But Morgan made a statement, which may be one of the most important statements we may ever hear, regarding race and discrimination, and specifically the racism that Morgan has endured while a student at Wissahickon. And at the time, I think we were all floored by what he said. I think that we were unhappy that he and other people have endured similar types of prejudice. And I think it made us all a little angry because we can do better. I think the other part of it was, and to you, Morgan, what I want to say initially is, I want to apologize because when you made your statement, which was incredibly heartfelt and powerful, from the board, you didn't get much of a response. And I want you to know that wasn't from a perspective of not caring or disinterest or being tired. People who know me know that I'm usually not someone who lacks something to say. But I can tell you, as I sat there and thought of what I could say at the moment, I thought there is nothing at all that I could say that was as important and heartfelt and appropriate as what you did. And I certainly wouldn't have said anything that would have brought justice to what you said. So for that, I'm sorry. I'm also sorry for everything that you have had to endure and every other student has had to endure within Wissahickon and our community if they have felt less than equal than anybody else. And we have pledged as a board, you may have seen that online, but personally, to eradicate hate. And you are a part of that, as well as some of our students and alumni who have met recently. A lot of us were involved in watching it, hearing it, and commenting on it. And just know that as long as I am on this board, as long as I am part of this community, I will do what I can to follow your lead. And I invite you to become part of that, because we are going to do more to get rid of hate and prejudice in whatever form it takes. And we will do what we can to make you proud. And I am proud to call you a fellow board member. And I wanted you to know that. So thank you.
Thanks, Marshall.
Thank you so much for the comments. Thank you so much. It means so much to me. I know it means so much for the people of my color that to hear you say that, because I feel like, me personally, I know a lot of people have had it worse than me. So I'm just here to just help spread, use my voice to help spread change. And so hopefully we can come together as a board to help create change.
And also, I want to thank you for being so forthright last night, Monday night. And I don't want to give the impression that I was not shocked by what you said. As I remarked then, it was an impossible act to follow as I made my little comment about starting times. But it's been my goal as a teacher for 35 years to stop any kind of use of racial epithets or any kind of attacks on students. And and as Marshall said, it's our pledge as a board. It should be our pledge as human beings to stop that kind of stuff going on. And I think it was just a shock to find that it was as extensive as you revealed. This is one of the reasons that it is so important to have students on the board as representatives who are not afraid to speak up. And I think, and the board members know, whenever we've interviewed students for your position, I've always asked, are you willing to bring things up that are not sweet and kind? Are you willing to step on toes? And you opened an amazingly important conversation that should not stop at what you said Monday. And I would expect the administration and the board to continue this conversation throughout. And again, as Marshall said, as a human being, I have to apologize to you. As a member of the board, I have to apologize to you. As a member of the Wissahickon community, we all have to apologize to you and everyone else who has been treated as less than equal. Thank you again.
Morgan,
I would just like to say thank you.
I'd like to thank you for your courage, Morgan. First night on the board, you showed such courage and such poise. Thank you. I'm really happy to be on the board with you. I look forward to many good conversations.
If I may, I know Olivia, I believe it might have been 2 meetings ago now, she did send you all the email with the link to the community conversation. You can hear many students share stories like Morgan's. They're really powerful and impactful. And I would urge you all, if you have not watched it, to please just, it gives you such insight into what it's like as a student at Wissahickon.
Joe,
Yeah.
I also, like you, attended that community conversation, and I was very moved by that event and very moved by Morgan's comments as well. I'm just wondering what we can do next. Is there a particular committee we can refer this to start immediately working on this list of demands from that community event? Can we form a subcommittee just to immediately jump on that?
Yeah,
I would say CASA is probably the best way to go about it, because that's a lot of people. That's like a club. It's like a cultural club. So that's probably the best club if you were to want to get a lot of information and insight about this. That'd probably be the best way.
And just to let the other board members know, Tracy and I have talked to Jim about making this a topic on our agenda at our August board meeting. What I was contemplating was inviting Jontica and Leanne, the alumni who helped organize the community event, as well as maybe some of the leaders of CASA to speak to the board at the board meeting and make a statement about some of these issues. We'll have a lot to consider and discuss at that meeting, so that would just be, a starting point. I think I'd like to follow that up with a more focused and dedicated session, just to have a dialogue with current and former students on this topic, where they can have a conversation directly with us as board members, and we can kind of talk through some of the issues and work together to come up with a course of action to try to make things better.
Joe, what do you think about having that as a subcommittee?
Yeah, and I think
As a committee.
that's absolutely a possibility as well. So in closing for this, I mean, I echo what my fellow board members said to you, Morgan. And one thing I want to add is that for me personally, I don't view this as a situation of simply individual bias or racism or even hate. I view this as something that's deeper, more systemic, and embedded in our education system, as well as the country in general. It's not just reflected in the thoughts or actions of individuals, it's embedded in the systems, the policies, the processes, the practices we put in place, and how we educate our students that produce disparate outcomes that keep one group of people down and another group of people elevated. And to me, it's beyond just the sort of outward and explicit and obvious expressions of prejudice, racism, or hate, but it's the more insidious, but I think more pervasive structures we have in our systems that continue and perpetuate the disparities of some of our persons of color in our schools. And so that's what I want to challenge us, and I'm committed for myself personally to push us to identify and root out and change those things to make the Wissahickon School District more equitable for every student, regardless of their race, culture, religious identity, gender identity, or what have you. So again, there's more to come, and we are committed as a board to make a difference and take this moment in time where there's a lot of attention around it and not let us pass us by without trying to affect some positive change.
I just want to make a quick comment, Joe, if I can. I made a few comments in the last meeting just before Morgan spoke. I didn't get a chance to speak again after he did. The message I want to say to Morgan directly is that I'm glad we've had a few minutes to discuss it tonight. We hear you, the board hears you, and the district hears you, and we feel your pain. I mentioned the other night, and I don't want to be repetitive, but as an African-American student and graduate of Wissahickon, the things that the students are dealing with today are the same things that we dealt with when I was there, and the same things that went on at Wissahickon far before me. And it saddens me, it sickens me that we are still having the same conversations and that very little has changed. In fact, I think that some things have gotten worse in some regards, and it's just completely unacceptable. And we have a lot of issues that we're dealing with on our plate right now that are immediate life-threatening issues. That issue, the issue of racial equality and inclusion, is just as important, but we are unable to give it the time and attention that it really deserves at this particular moment. But what I don't want to pass is the significance and the urgency of now. And what I don't want to pass is time in that 3-4 weeks, 3 or 4 months, however long it takes for us to get back to some sense of normalcy and the conversations diminish around racial diversity, racial inclusion and diversity, and then it goes back to the back burner. I want us to see, and I want us to put action items in place now that are sustainable long-term so this conversation continues. But beyond just conversation, we need to put action items in place. And I think that's what we saw from the list of demands that came from the other students.
Paul, you're mute.
And we need to have a plan that we put in place, whether it includes diversity officers being placed in our schools, whether we are assigning teachers that responsibility, whatever plan we come up with, it needs to be a plan that is sustainable, a plan that is addressing the immediate issues as well as the long-term systemic issues that Joe referred to, and a plan that we can actually measure the results so that we can track to see how we are doing in time. And that relates to, again, diversity and inclusion, relates to the achievement gap. It relates to all these issues that are intertwined, that are related, that all need to be brought to the forefront. I've had some conversations with board members over the 2 years that I've been on the board. I've had conversations with the administration specifically, and they were very good conversations. But what was lacking is the follow-up and the action behind the initial conversations. And it's great that the world is talking about them today. I'm encouraged. I'm in these meetings, on Zoom meetings, 2 or 3 times a day, addressing it for different groups that I'm a part of, and it's phenomenal. But I don't want to see this moment in time leave us without action items being put in place. And so I think a subcommittee and a committee is essential. it be a standing committee, not just a one-off committee that, again, is temporary, but that is long-term and that continues to deal with this. That includes the student body, that includes representatives of the community. That is an all-inclusive event that uses all the resources that our wonderful community has that we can bring to bear. And I'll leave it at that because I know we have a lot of other things to discuss tonight, and I could talk about this for quite some time. But I really appreciate everyone's efforts. Again, Morgan, I appreciate your courage to stand up and to voice your truth and the experiences that you've had, as well as the other students that did so bravely a few weeks ago at Penland Park as well. It takes tremendous courage to do that, and I applaud all of you.
All right.
I would just like to say, my last final comments for tonight about this would be, I'd like to thank all of the fellow board members for the comments and the acknowledgements of what I had said on Monday night, and I appreciate it. The comments that I made were just a stepping stone in the right direction, but I believe it was a big stepping stone to start a conversation. So I would just like to thank all of you guys for voicing your opinions.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Any additional board comments before we get into the main topic here? All right. So again, the primary objective for our meeting tonight is to revisit the fall reopening plan, have a discussion about it, and then ultimately take a vote on it and see where we are at. So with that, Jim, can you present to the board what your recommended reopening plan is, taking into consideration what happened on Monday?
Yes, thank you. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on Monday, and first thing I want to say is I certainly made a couple mistakes that night. The one that eats at me the most is at the end of the meeting, when after Morgan made his comments, I didn't say anything. And I was, like everybody else, I was kind of either dumbstruck or just so struck by the honesty and the travesty of it that I didn't say anything. I regret that. And we've since reached out to Morgan, and Morgan is going to be, I know you're here, Morgan, and I can say to you now, like everybody else has said, your courage is admirable. And for everybody else's knowledge, we've reached out to Morgan to be part of this solution and help us. I also regret the not mentioning that this topic, the topic of racial injustice and cultural responsiveness in general, is going to become one of, if not the major initiatives of the district for 3 to 5 years. And the reason I say that is because it's not fleeting. We have experts helping us develop the plan. We're going to add Morgan and other students to that. We've had conversations with the CASA students, and they're awesome, and we will continue that. I like the idea of adding the alums who were involved with the event and just interested. We'll commit ourselves to this. And one of the problems with Monday is I didn't say that. So I want to be very clear about that. The district is committing, and Morgan, you will be a part of that. So thank you for your comments once again. The other reflection that I had on Monday was, as we continue to discuss the proposed plan, for reopening and whatnot, I think I wish that we could, or I wish that I was able to better frame it in this sense. Districts all over our area, the state, everywhere, are grappling with these very same issues. And we have a suggested plan, a recommended plan that we're going to talk about here a little bit. And frankly, we talked about it a lot on Monday, so we'll talk about it some more tonight. This plan that we have was the result of an incredible amount of studying and review and thought. The team we have here, everyone involved, the stakeholders, this is not like, some national level of government, we're all familiar with. Maybe there's a bunch of lickspittles just sitting there kind of telling the people what they want to hear. This was a lot of give and take and back and forth and, hey, what's the pros of that and the cons of that? And no, I disagree. And so what we've come up with tonight is not going to satisfy everybody. And there are a lot of ideas that did not make it into this, a lot of ideas that were considered and not included for whatever reason, and a lot of ideas that were included. I think one of the nice things about last Monday is, even though it's not included in the document per se here, and even though we are still recommending the same approach that we did, and we'll talk about it in a second, but there was a good conversation. So we actually can include some of the ideas. So when students are home in the 7 to 12 hybrid model, for example, it's their B day and they're not in, it's quite conceivable that our teachers, who are incredibly creative and they want exactly what we all want. Our teachers want the very best instructional experience for our students. So if on a day where half the students are in, the other half are at home, and something presents itself as an opportunity to possibly bring in the other students, have everybody together at once, no one should think that our teachers would never take advantage of that. They want the same things that we do. Now they've weighed in, and I regret not letting my teacher background speak more loudly on Monday, because I knew exactly where the reaction was going to be for the idea of live streaming. It's a viable idea, but it just doesn't work for our purposes. And I knew that from the teacher. I knew that I was a high school teacher. I knew that, and I just didn't say it strongly enough. I was trying to get us to consensus, and I think that was a mistake as well. So what we have tonight is the same exact thing that we proposed on Monday. And the document, I could share it again. I mean, I don't know that we want to necessarily take up the screen, but it includes an arrangement for elementary school, K to 5, which is option A, in person every day, or option B, fully virtual every day. For sure, there's definitely interest in a hybrid at the elementary level. Many people like that idea. Many people like the idea of going to school every day. So, and we're not big enough, we can't possibly arrange or fix for some sort of hybrid of that, or I should say combination of that. So we chose for K to 5 in person every day. We feel very strongly that students that age do much better in person. They don't do very well asynchronous at home. We know there are issues with getting the kids situated and maybe childcare, or just kind of focused on joining the class from home. And for these reasons, we are recommending an in-person at K to 5. And we certainly know there are challenges with that. There are challenges with every single one of the ideas that have been put forth. And if I counted, I'd probably get well over 1,000 emails right now of ideas and suggestions. So those are that's the elementary school, K to 5.
And Jim,
Yes.
So to be clear, for K to 5 is unchanged from Monday and what was originally recommended. It's in person every day for K to 5 students as the primary model. But if you're not comfortable with that, you have the option to go 100% virtual. But so it's really, that's the option. It's come to school or go virtual.
Right.
And the virtual for elementary would be with Zig and teachers.
The virtual for grades K to 6, yes. So one grade of middle school, but K to 6 is elementary teachers. And the reason for that is that K to 6 certification can teach all subjects.
And for clarification, that is synchronous, real-time learning for a dedicated WSD teacher.
Right. So I think that's a really good question. And the answer to that is yes, with an asterisk. One of the things we heard for sure in the spring, like reviews and feedback from the spring, was the need for more interaction with teachers and classmates. Now, it's going to have to be virtually through Zoom, but to the extent that that's synchronous, maybe that's the word, or maybe interactive, I think might be a little more descriptive. One thing though that I want to disabuse us all of is it's nobody's best idea that a 6-year-old sit in front of, gets plucked down in a computer, in front of a computer at 8 a.m. and then stay there till 3 p.m. Okay, none of us think that's working. So the reason I answer your question, Paul, with an asterisk is there'll be a tremendous amount of interactive, live teaching and learning going on. But it's not going to be like a full school day where you put Johnny in a room and let him out for lunch and recess and maybe a break. It's going to be metered in a way that makes sense for the age group. It's really good to emphasize, though, that it is different from what parents saw and experienced in the spring. That's gone now. Totally different environment, totally different circumstances. Now we're back to taking attendance every single day, holding students accountable for their work, and having it be much more rigorous and sort of normal that way. I don't know if that helps answer your question, but
That does.
okay.
So I think just in general, there's been a lot of confusion around the terminology. People were confused about what that experience would mean if it's synchronous or if it's asynchronous, and specifically how that would be delivered. And so that's why I asked, because there's been a lot of questions, a lot of confusion that I wanted to be able to have the benefit of people hearing for the record.
Really good point. Very good question. The difference between spring and fall, if one chooses virtual, will be night and day. And I think this might be a good point to include, even though it's not on this document, so this is what people can choose from right now. Option A at the elementary level at K-5 is in person every day, or option B is the fully virtual, which we just discussed. That's what the choice is, A or B. It's quite possible that at some point schools shut down for some reason. Maybe the governor will shut it down. Maybe the local health department will shut it down. I don't know what. So if the entire school is virtual, then we have to talk about what happens then. Okay, and in the K-5 level, it's actually pretty easy. Whichever option you chose, option A or option B, to start the year, is what you have when the schools are closed down. And why? Because you already have a teacher, you already have a class, and it actually works. So at K-5, elementary, and then also to some extent 6, it's pretty straightforward. Now, I will say this is an important piece, though. If you choose fully virtual, option B, you might be a 3rd grade student, and there might be 3 3rd grade students from Bluebell, and 4 from Lower Gwynedd, and 7 from Stony, and 6 from Shady. So whatever all that adds up to, that's your class. Your class is actually a combination of kids from all 4 schools. That's your virtual class every day. You get to see them online. Actually, it'd be kind of fun when everything turns to normal and you get to middle school. You will have a bunch of classmates you didn't know prior. In any event, you'll have a Wissahickon teacher. It might be a Bluebell teacher. It might be Stony. We haven't figured that part out yet. Depends on how many 3rd graders want to be virtual. If we have 40 3rd graders that want to be virtual, then we have 2 virtual classes of 20 each. It's just like we do the normal class sizes and thoughts and staffing decisions in a normal year. It's just that it'll be virtual. So I think again, to be perfectly transparent here, the call for hybrid arrangement at K-5 is very strong. And I don't want people to think that we're just ignoring it. We're not ignoring it. We're just not recommending it. And there's a big difference. Because if we recommended it and not the 100% in person, I'd have that same statement, just flipping the variables. It's just hard. People are have very set opinions as to how this thing should play out. And what we all should just, I hope, realize is that we're just not going to get to perfect.
So
There is no
Jim,
perfect solution.
I have one question for it. So I guess if it's the virtual, it'll be interactive and the time that they have will be live interactive. Does that sound right? Or
Yeah.
is there going to be times where they'll, be doing kind of stuff when they feel like it? When they have the time at the house, like.
Quite possibly in some of the encore subjects, those won't be live and synchronous. Those might be a little more apt to be asynchronous, just given the nature of those.
Okay.
So the answer is, for core subjects, almost always interactive, or at least, if not interactive, just, like in a regular classroom, you would break into groups and do things. And that's
Right.
You're not with the teacher when you're across the room, but the teacher will come over and see how things are going, answer questions, and then, that kind of arrangement.
Okay.
It will not be lecturing, of course. It'll be as much as we can recreate good teaching and learning at the elementary level as much as we can virtually.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
I've received a lot of questions from parents over the past couple of days about just logistics, having an understanding of how it will work before they make a decision.
Okay.
Less than a week. Is it going to be the same I understand it's going to be different than the spring, but is it still going to be on Teams? Is that where the students are going to be having their lessons every day, or is it going to be on a new format?
Gary, you want to share a little bit on that part, please?
Yeah, so one of the things that from the spring we knew we needed to do moving forward is to keep things as consistent as we possibly could. So platforms used in the spring would be followed in the fall. We'd be using Microsoft Teams K-12. That's the video conferencing tool that we'll be using. Seesaw will be used as the platform for the early childhood and K-3. And we'll use Schoology and the other smaller platforms that we're using, but basically those are the anchoring software for K-12.
And we approved the order of the computers a couple of meetings ago. Are those going to be distributed then to the parents before the beginning of the school year for the virtual aspect of the school?
No, the intention is that the Dell Chromebooks will be in the buildings and be used in the classroom. And at the time when we need to shift, if and when we need to shift to a school closure and go remote, then the laptops or the Chromebooks will be picked up by parents, where they will be distributed to parents at that time and kept at home for the time that the students are needing the device.
Amy, if I can, you're asking about people who choose fully virtual from the start of the year.
Yes, sorry, I wasn't clear on that. I apologize. Yeah, if you start virtual, are you being provided a computer, or are you expected to provide your own?
We will provide you the computer. If the child is on the virtual program, they will need the computer device and they will be distributed the device.
And my understanding is workbooks as well. I've been getting that question from parents too. We're going to provide all the materials at the outset.
Any of the materials that we'd be providing in the day will be provided for the virtual students, just like the same. It's going to follow the same curriculum. They're going to follow the same basic time frame of the school day, and they will be in touch with their in-school partners just to make sure they're sort of keeping pace and planning somewhat together.
Okay, and that was going to be another question I had, is how we're making sure if we're having mixed classes. So you might have students from Bluebell, Lower Gwinnett, Stony Creek, all in the same virtual class, and now somebody has to quarantine and they're out for 14 days and they're joining this virtual class. How are the teachers going to be having regular meetings to make sure that they're kind of staying on the same page so that that student doesn't step into a more advanced lesson?
Yes, one of the things we'll have the virtual teacher do is make sure that that teacher who's teaching virtually will make sure that they're in communication with a team from one of the schools who will maintain that instructional pace. We very well know that children could be quarantined and need to go home, and therefore we'd want them to jump on one of the classrooms that's virtual and be able to remain with that class for the 2-week period or 3-week, whatever it takes, doing that work, which is hopefully aligned to the other class that the child is left. May not be perfect like day to day, but it's certainly going to be in the same unit, in the same area of focus in math, in English language arts, social studies, and science.
Okay, and my last question is, January, the end of the semester, that's when we're given the option to switch. We want to come either to go virtual or to go back to school. When are parents going to be asked to, or if we have a deadline, be asked to make that decision that they want to do that?
We haven't figured that part out, Amy. I would guess November-ish for the same staffing, like maybe end of November, just so we can get staffing changes necessary. But I haven't given that thought yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how that affects numbers. If we suddenly have a large influx of students that want to return, if we're going to have to add additional classes, or if they're just going to join existing classes.
Might be a little both. I mean, if it gives us an imbalance somewhere, we'll be ready to react. We don't have any intention of somehow tricking the system so that we can, save money on teacher salaries or whatever by, stuffing more kids in a class. It's actually the opposite. Believe me when I say it would be really awesome in our minds if this went just as smoothly as possible with as few complaints and criticisms as possible. It might be a little too late for that, but in any event, if that switchover date comes and some class ends up with 32 kids in it, okay, we'll fix it. We'll figure something out. I don't know exactly what that looks like now, and that's why actually, as you bring that point up, it might have to be more like mid-November to give us enough time to figure it out. But we will provide us, that's why everyone's being asked to commit to us by July 31st, which is in 9 days now. And that's because we need the time to figure out where people are going and who's where.
Okay, thank you.
Amy,
I would point out, and each of the 6 building principals sent home to parents a list of answers to questions about details, common questions. Principals are also fielding individual questions about individual circumstances. And each of the 6 had another letter or FAQ ready to go out on Tuesday morning, yesterday, but they had to hold it because Monday night's meeting got recessed until tonight. So depending on what happens tonight, if we get some consensus and an approval, then tomorrow morning, all 6 principals will send out another list of details, building specific, in time for people to think about it. If they don't understand it, they ask a question of the principal, and we have 9 days. So that's not a lot of time, but it's more than a couple days for people to get their questions answered. So there was something that was going to go out yesterday. It's going to go out again tomorrow. And that should prompt either answer questions or prompt clarifications.
I'm sorry. I do have one more question I just thought of. What are we doing to help inform kindergarten parents to make this decision? Like, I'm a parent, I have kids in the school district. I know how the school day runs at this point. I think I can make a decision for my kids based on my understanding of what happened in the spring, how I see the fall happening based on what they've done in the past couple of years. But for a kindergarten parent, I would be nervous, like making that decision, not knowing what the school day even looks like, and then having to make a decision whether my child's going to be virtual learning at home and I have to support that, or sending them into the school where I may be concerned about the risks they're facing.
That's a really good question. We have included all incoming kindergarten families on our distribution lists, but Gary, let's make a note to maybe figure out a way to somehow, I know we're going to do we have some interviews coming in, screening, whatever you want to call it, but maybe there's a way to enhance the understanding of incoming brand new families before they have to make that decision.
Yeah, I will say that there's been a fair amount of communication with K parents on the phone, through email, through the principals, myself. There's been a fair amount of questions and answer, but I agree with you. I think that would be a help.
Thank you.
Yeah, Amy, if you're done, I have a follow-on question. For the virtual classes, are we going to have caps or limits on the number of students in those virtual classrooms?
Yes, the answer is we will treat the virtual class sizes, student load for teachers the same as we do the in-person. So it kind of depends on the age, and it goes up a little bit each year, but yes, we would not, again, we have no intention of sticking 40 kids in a virtual classroom and just telling the teacher to make it work. We're fortunate. We don't have to be in a position to do that. Now, it could be the case that there's 24 kids, say, in a virtual classroom. And we can have the annual conversation about class sizes and it's too big, too small, blah, blah, blah. But to answer your question, we plan on treating it exactly the same as we do with in-person classes.
Thank you.
Okay. So that takes us to middle school, where middle school has two options and parents will once again choose option A or option B. In middle school, option A is called a hybrid because it's an in-person experience every other day. And half of your class comes in this day and half comes in the next day. And so if it's like A, B, if you're an A day person, you're in person live in the school A days, and on B days, you're home. And last meeting on Monday, we discussed quite a bit because this is the same construct for grades 9 to 12. We discussed options for that day when you're at home. And we, in the last 48 hours, gave quite a bit of thought to the possibility of live streaming or the pros and cons of it. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, the recommendation is to not necessarily do that, certainly not as a requirement, but to offer it up to teachers as a possibility, as a teaching tool, as another way for them to maximize an opportunity that they may see that day. Maybe a science lesson lends itself to that. Maybe you can bring some students in from who are home that day. We're not going to hardwire it into the plan. So to be clear, the plan is the day you're off, B day, let's say, if you're an A day student, is you're at home doing asynchronous things that the teacher has planned and communicated.
Jim, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Okay, so I know on whatever day that was that we had our last meeting 8 years ago, you had mentioned live streaming. I was not suggesting live streaming. My suggestion was more of like the Microsoft Teams approach where, because I think, I was getting some emails of we can't live stream, the kids' pictures will be out there. That's not what I was suggesting at all. And I just wanted to let the team know, the focus group team that you were working with, I do appreciate everything that you guys did. And I know that it takes a lot of time and it was a lot of energy and it was a very thoughtful process. So I wanted to recognize everybody that did that. My fear of that second day at home, I just want to make sure, and I know you've said it now, and I'm a little bit more reassured, I don't want it to be like the spring. And I think every parent sitting out there wants to be sure that that second day when they are at home is not like the spring. I'm glad that the students will be held accountable. There will be attendance taken. There will be things that are going to be graded, and the teachers will have a lot more leeway this time of holding students accountable where we really weren't holding them accountable in the spring. So I think with that, it will be a much better approach. I did hear from a lot of teachers and, I believe that they like this plan. And I like the fact that we are now saying that if they want to have everybody do something on a day, that they do have that option. They don't have to, but if they want to, it's out there and they can use it. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't limiting them either, saying that, no, you can't participate on those days, and that it is open and they're teachers and they know what's best and how to teach their students, and they have the opportunity to do that.
I think that's very well said. And I think that what we're touching on is professional discretion. And if we had a teaching staff of less than stellar or inexperienced or whatever, we might be a little more prescriptive as to what we think that B day should look like. But given that we have the staff we do, and I know that there's just an incredible amount of creativity and true commitment to their students out there, the alternate days at home will be, as you described, a much more rigorous and fulfilling experience than what was in the spring.
Jim, can I get clarification on something?
Hmm.
I think you said that there will be a cap on the virtual classes. Is that correct?
At K, well, okay, so grades K to 6, the virtual classes are taught by our teachers. And those class sizes will be the same as we normally have in buildings, depends on the grade level.
So I just want to understand then, if more people feel comfortable K to 5, K to 6 going to the virtual, and we are going to cap it, there is the possibility that people who do not want to be in school but would rather have a virtual experience will be told you cannot join that and you will be going.
No, that's absolutely not correct.
Well, that's what I want clarification on.
Good question. Answer is no, it's not correct. And if we have more kids, like I said, in grade 3, then say 20, whatever the number is, 25 or whatever, and it ends up being 40, we'll have another section of grade 3 virtual.
So going then the other way, what if you have nobody who wants to do the virtual and everybody wants to go to school? And the teachers hear about this and they hear that they're going to have a full classroom in every class and they say, I'm not doing it. What's the backup plan?
Well, you put your finger on one of the major variables that all of us across the state and country are dealing with, and that is how will the staffing question play out in terms of numbers of bodies available and willing? We don't have an answer to that because we can't know that until we share with teachers what it looks like. So if this is the plan tonight, and if it's approved, then teachers will know this is what it's going to look like. Then on the 31st, we'll gather all the preferences from families, virtual or not, and then we'll know how many third graders we have in Bluebell, say. And then we'll do our normal routine of, okay, well, in this case, we have, say, 72 third graders, let's just say, who want to be live in person. Okay, so that's, if my math is right, 24 in a class, three classes of 24. Okay, well, that's what, then the teacher was like, oh, okay, that's what it's going to look like for me. And then they make their decision.
And if that decision is not to return to class, what is the plan?
Then districts all over will be scrambling to find substitutes or long-term subs to meet the staffing needs. And just to be clear to everybody who's listening in, all 700 or however many, it's quite possible that districts everywhere can't staff the schools in the fall. And not because you don't pay enough or you don't try hard enough. It's just because you literally can't find enough qualified, certificated teachers who can or will come to school, or bus drivers for that matter. I mean, we might not be able to provide busing across districts because we won't have that. We just don't know. We can't tell. And then the plan is, to your point, then we're going to have to go virtual 100% because we can't provide an in-person option.
And if that's the case, will we be ready to go that day if that is the scenario?
As long as we get enough advance notice from people about their preferences, yes. If all of a sudden on August 30th, we get an avalanche of information from people that they just decided, then we're going to be delayed. We can't, there's nothing we can do if people spring a decision on us, which is why we set these deadlines. I know they're onerous, and I know we only get 9 days before parents are going to have to make the decision, and we need more details. But if we don't set these deadlines, we're going to be in the environment you kind of described, which is scurrying to figure out something with 48 hours before school starts. And we may be in that anyway, because there's nothing to prevent someone from deciding at the end of the month, I just can't do it. We hope they give us notice. We hope they have that thought prior, but if it happens, it happens. And then we'll we'll adjust the best we can. It might delay the opening of school a couple of days. I don't know. And this is not unique to us, obviously, and no one has this figured out because you can't, it's just the nature of this challenge we're up against.
Question, Jim. Have we discussed with the teachers or taken a survey as to how many are going to be willing to go in? Yeah.
We took a very, or let me rephrase it, not with these options. So we couldn't ask them, hey, so anyway, you'll be going to school every day, or you'll have half your students. As soon as we nail down our plan, yes, then we're going to, and we're going to see if we get some information from that. On top, though, I will say that we've shared quite a bit of information with staff. Kathy, Gary, and I spent a really good an hour today, speaking with all the staff on Zoom. It wasn't, if you will, interactive. It was synchronous because it was live, but we did the talking. And we wanted to share with them that we understand that you're very anxious, and frankly, all of us are anxious. And then Kathy spent a good bit of time sharing with them various options that exist in law, in human resources parlance that only she could say and explain. And she's had at least 40, I think, so far, individual conversations with people who have situations that are particular, and she's able to spell out options. So until we have a plan, we actually can't really get reliable input from the staff as to what they would do come fall. But we will do that.
Jim, have any of the union representatives been a part of the discussion, or have they weighed in? Do we have an idea of what direction they're going to give to the teachers, if any?
The answer is yes. Good question. And we made sure that the union co-presidents were part of the task force from the get-go. And then we also added, as we went along, multiple union members, nurses, teachers, other staff members, so that there was a sizable presence. But we've never really asked them, like, what's the union's position on this? Because they are waiting for direction from Harrisburg. They're going to take direction from PSEA on what to do about these things. Individual teachers can certainly have opinions, but in terms of like official union position, I would hesitate to put our local leaders in a position to make a statement like that when there's so much going on in Harrisburg right now, and the politics is so fierce that we're trying to deal with our local teachers as best we can, individuals who we know have certain circumstances, and we're just trying to work with them as best we can, rather than as a block, if that makes sense.
Yep, understood.
Okay. So as we move on to middle school, as I mentioned, families have a choice. Option A is the hybrid, and we just discussed that. Option B is the fully virtual for middle school. Just like in elementary school, you had A and B. B in middle school looks different though, and this is the same exact thing we talked about on Monday. For students in grade 6, if you want to be fully virtual, then your experience is going to be the same exact as students in grades K to 5. And remember, that's because teacher certifications cover grades K to 6, all subjects. You can be like, in a sense, a generalist. So students in grade 6 who want option B will have the same exact thing we talked about with elementary. Students in 7 and 8, and for that matter, 9, 10, 11, and 12, fully virtual option is the Wissahickon Virtual Academy. We can't staff that with our own teachers because now we get into issues of specific subject area certifications. And a student's schedule is there's so many permutations. You could have honors this, or you could have academic level that, maybe AP here. You might take French, somebody else might take Spanish. There's no way to make such a varied scheduled day work in a small school. I mean, you need a huge school to make that work. So, but I will say that other districts are representing that they're making that work. And I'm not going to name any district by name, but let's just say that they haven't figured it out yet. They think they can figure it out, and maybe they can, but I'm not willing to come forward and say, hey, we're going to have our teachers teach the virtual for 7 to 12 because we can't figure it out. We have a solution. I know it's not popular in some circles, but it's a good program. The Wissahickon Virtual Academy exists now. We have some students in it now. It's accredited. It has Pennsylvania-based standards, but the problem that people don't like about it is it's asynchronous. Not entirely, but mostly.
And I think they also don't like that it's not Wissahickon staff directly.
Right. Agreed.
Right. Although there is some support from Wissahickon guidance counselors and other support services available, the core teachers are not Wissahickon employees. So I think that's another concern that we've been hearing.
Now, the good news about the virtual academy, as opposed to, say, choosing a cyber charter school or something like that, is you're still a Wissahickon student. You still get the supports that Joe mentioned, be it guidance or extra writing support, math support. You still participate in any activities we're able to offer. And however, it's asynchronous. It's really, it's if you will, what the spring looked like, which people did not like. Mind you, some people like that. So this works for some people, and it doesn't work for other people.
Well,
That's
Jim,
another example of one of these things we're up against.
when you say it's like the spring, it's really not, because students are going to be held accountable.
Oh, that's a fair
Correct.
point. I just meant the asynchronous part. Yeah, very good
Yeah.
point.
we don't want to say it's going to be like spring,
No, okay.
because
Thank you for
they're
clarifying.
going to be held accountable, and do they do
Absolutely.
attendance and all of that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to Tracy's point, I think what came across loud and clear, and I think part of the confusion is that the term asynchronous became equated with spring, which is equated with no attendance, no accountability, no rigor, and no engagement. So that's where I think a lot of the problems came from. But as we've discussed earlier, when we're talking about asynchronous education in the fall, it does have accountability, rigor. There's going to be a focus and emphasis on engagement and participation. And holding kids accountable for getting the asynchronous work done. So
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's middle school.
Jim, can I just ask a question on that? I'm sorry. I did get one question, at least from a parent, about understanding a little bit more about that program, because it appears on their website that MCIU has third-party vendors that actually they partner with that actually teach the courses. What do we know? And I looked at their website, and it does appear that there are a couple of vendors that they work with. What do we know about the quality of these vendors and the quality of the courses they're teaching compared to the courses that we offer with the Hickman?
Okay, Gary, you want to take that?
Sure. So all of the courses offered at MCIU through the Virtual Academy are all delivered through a series of vendors, and we primarily use Montgomery Virtual Program, Edgenuity as our two primary ones. Each of the vendors has been vetted by the MCIU, and they offer all courses that are standards-based for Pennsylvania. Some of the vendors offer certain courses, more unique courses than others. So for example, if we're looking for a world language course, one of the vendors seems to offer stronger programming in that area. So we go to them for that. So the vendors are certainly under in a relationship with the MCIU, and they have been vetted, and they have been working with them in the program for quite some time. And we have been through a year experience now with them in our virtual academy directly. I will say we met with them this past week. They're very eager to work with us and continue to support us in our efforts to deliver our programs. And they've been extremely forthcoming in terms of what they can offer in terms of support and how they work with the district, also in regard to special education. So It's a very sound program, and there's good reviews on their work. And we're confident that the programming offering our students is rigorous, Pennsylvania standard based, and ready to go.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I just have one follow-up. I also, in reading the materials online, I was a little confused about who does the grading. Does the teacher in the academy do the grading? Or is it something that we determine on our end what the grade is for the course?
Yeah, each of the courses is associated with a teacher at the MVP. Those teachers are developing the lessons, the lesson design. They're also available for office hours to meet with the student. They do the lesson planning, they do the assignments, and they do the grading and evaluation and feedback to students and ultimate grading for the course.
Okay, thank you.
And there is
So,
one other thing. One
Ron.
second, Trace. There, one thing
Hey, Ron.
that is, yeah, just one more. That this is not like the run-of-the-mill cyber charter school that is a for-profit school. And these for-profit cyber schools, there's not one in the state of Pennsylvania that has acceptable yearly progress. Generally, the students do worse than their peers do in brick and mortar schools. That is the difference between our cyber school and the other ones that you see advertised on billboards and on TV. I'm sorry, Tracy.
I have a question. So we have some very unique classes at the high school that, you know, may have a few students like Japanese 4 or something along those lines.
Mhm.
Now, if you're involved in something like that, would that translate over into, is the virtual school going to be offering those types of things?
Yes, and we actually were using world language as an example. The IU offers the courses in world language years 1, 2, 3. They offer the A and the B, the part 7th grade, 8th grade, half a year part of the program. And they also offer AP.
I have a question, Jim, back to K through 5. Do we still have the 3-foot distancing that we're supposed to do with the children? Is that a recommendation?
We have around 4 feet or so. We do not have the 6. 6 is a recommendation. It's a little, there's a misconception that it's some sort of requirement from somebody. It's not. It's recommended. But remember, we have the masks, and this is, I know this is not popular with younger students, but we have the masks requirement at all times. So the answer is yes, we've ordered more desks to help us. We were going to move furniture out of the classroom. It just kind of depends on specific school and class and how many students are in there, of course.
Right.
But we believe it'll be 4.
Okay, while we're on that mask topic, do we have a plan in place for consequences if a student comes in to his high school English class and says, I'm not wearing the mask. My parents said I didn't have to.
Okay, well, the answer to that is no, and because the governor's order about masks, as we all know, required indoors or whenever you can't maintain 6 feet outdoors, except for people who have this condition or another medical condition, let's just say. So if you have a medical condition, you don't have to wear a mask. That's per the governor's orders. And then another little caveat in the governor's orders is schools are not allowed to require documentation or to question somebody's medical condition.
That gives a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah, right. So it's quite possible that we may end up going down the path of, well, we can't question it, but let's start the 504 process, maybe, you know, to make an accommodation for you, something like that. Districts haven't had to do that because, of course, we haven't been open yet. And we're hoping that through an appeal to community, even though I know there are people out there who don't believe in the efficacy of masks, through an appeal to just being good people to, even if you don't believe in it, others do, so maybe it's a courtesy to others. We believe it's way more than the courtesy. We as a district leadership team happen to believe it's the most effective way to help stop the spread of this thing. But we also have to comply with the governor's orders. So we'll try to mix those two things together with an appeal to community, and hopefully there won't be that many instances where we have to pursue the 504 or whatever the options are.
So we're not allowed to say on school buses where you're right next to your seat buddy, we're not allowed to say masks are required.
That's different. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Different because transportation can be is not part of the public school necessarily experience. So if you don't want to wear a mask on a bus, that's okay. You just don't get to ride the bus.
But not that first day.
But
Yeah. Right. So a good point is everybody remembers with great, shall we say, affinity, all the really clean and efficient bus runs on day one. Well, guess what? I want to set expectations for bus run confusion, but also car line confusion. We are more than aware, acutely aware of how many people may not want to ride the bus. So that's just something we're going to have to deal with. We really don't have any other way other than dealing with it. And it's building specific. So each principal will be in very close communication with the parents of that school to figure things out.
And will you be also in close communications with the local police departments to help maybe with the flow of traffic?
Absolutely. Very good point. And the answer is a definite yes. They're always cooperative with us, and we really appreciate their relationship.
Jim, will we be requiring liability waivers?
For what, Marshall? Liability for what?
For parents, from any liability? Will they be asked to? No, okay.
Jim, regarding the facial mask requirement or lack thereof, I've heard from a few teachers that there are major concerns if there's not a mandatory enforceable mask policy, that there's some concern over their safety. And understandably so. If we're not able to enforce that, and if the laws are somewhat ambiguous as to how they can be enforced, is there an option for us to require some sort of additional testing for students who do not wear masks? For instance, a temperature test or something that could be administered to them, specifically those who don't wear masks, to help ensure the safety of the other students and the faculty?
That's a good question, Paul. We're gonna have to run that by attorney because I don't know if we can single people out. But when I thought you said I thought you were going down the 504 road. We see the thing about the masks is that as much as I personally believe in them, we all know it's an incredibly volatile topic. For some reason, it's become politicized, partisan politics, whatever. So saying something in a Zoom of 1,000 people is a little dicey on the subject of masks, other than to say, but when we say mask, by the way, we also include face covering. So that could be a shield. Those are acceptable. You don't have to have a mask. You have a face shield. You can use one of those gaiters that pull up that act like a mask. All of those are acceptable face coverings. And if a student, I mean, we can explore ways of sitting a student maybe further apart. I don't know if we can single them out. There's reasons why you can't do certain consequences to public consequences for behavior. But I would be remiss if I didn't carve out that little piece of the governor's orders that talks about whether or not schools can require documentation. But we have legal opinions that we can require the 504 process, which at least makes it a little more of a hurdle. And you might have, through that, you might have a doctor's note required or some sort of doctor's input. And we can make, I don't really want to get in an environment where we're from day one, like adversarial relationship with X number of students. I'm very hopeful that the community sees this as a community issue. And
I would think the one comment that maybe we can make is, whether you agree with a mask or you don't agree with a mask. if we are asking everyone to wear a mask, we are asking them to wear it to stem the spread of this virus. Because if you are interested in going to school in this hybrid situation, apparently you want to be in school. And the worst thing that you can do is come in, force the spread of this virus, and force the school to go virtual. So really, if you want the hybrid and you want to go to school, I would hope that you would also think of the consequences of your actions. If you spread the virus, it could force the close of school, and what you wanted is now going to end.
I just wanted to throw in, it might be a good idea to consider for K-5 teachers, the shields. I mean, they're in such close contact, and little ones are not going to be wearing the masks. And
Yeah, no, they absolutely, teachers. I have a feeling if I were still a teacher, I would choose a shield just because of the ability to communicate and sort of exist would be better. But either it's an option, and that's what I would choose. But if people prefer masks, that's okay too.
And at that level too, a lot of the teaching, there's a lot of emotions going on then. And by having the shield, you can see emotions. The students can see emotions.
True.
And not have that covered. I mean, that's a big part of that environment as well.
True.
So if someone chose not to wear a mask, they would then be subject to the 6-foot requirement, no matter in the classroom, on the bus, in the lunchroom. Is that correct or not?
Well, it wouldn't be on the bus just because they have to wear a mask on the bus. You remember that's different from schools. I'm not sure about our ability to do things like sit. It would be like, it's like a public, I'm not sure if we can sit students 6 feet apart necessarily just because you don't wear a mask. We might be able to, but there's still problems with even so. I mean, so that takes care of a good part of the day, but you're going to be moving around, and we don't want to, in a sense, it would be a label. I really feel like this isn't going to be an answer that's going to resonate well, but I really feel like our ability to have as many people as possible wearing masks is going to be an appeal to community. And we're just going to have to, and no shaming. That's not it. That's not going to work. And I feel like a positive reinforcement is going to work here more than the negative one. That might be too idealistic, but given the parameters of the order and what we have to work with, I think we better try that anyway.
I think we have to have a program that says, I wear a mask to keep you safe. You wear a mask to keep me safe. It's just that simple.
I happen to
For
agree
most
with you.
people.
Yes, and we'll have things like that. Yes.
Hey, this is Zeffie. If we could go back, I had some more kind of questions about the virtual academy and the hybrid program. So for virtual academy, for example, for grades 7, 8, if a student has a GEIP or an IEP, would the virtual academy support those students? That's my first question.
So the answer to that is, for the IEP, the IEP would require supports for the student. They're individualized. So Kelly Heim-McCloskey and her team would be working to figure out what supports are needed and put them in place. That's currently happening with students in the virtual academy who have attended there during the 1920 school year. With regard, what was the second part of it, Zeffie?
The GEIP. So if you have a GEIP, do you get that support in the virtual academy?
Right. So at the middle school, I was discussing this with Dr. Heim-McCloskey today. The middle school's GIEP, the electives that the students will do, the seminar program, that would not be offered through the academy. And we would need to make accommodations to make sure that program was offered virtually for the students attending the academy, done by the special ed team in Wissahickon.
Great. And then on the high school level, We offer quite a bit of honors classes and AP classes at the traditional school. Would we have those same honors and AP offerings for the virtual academy students?
There's quite an array. The AP course selections are pretty strong. I don't think we would find a situation where we don't have one to offer that is a match for what the students have currently selected.
Okay,
Gary,
great.
just to clarify, you're saying that everything that's offered at Wissahickon, the regular high school, could be taken at the virtual academy.
Yes, that's our expectation. We've talked to them, they think they can do that. We just need to look at the schedule they currently have and do a matchup with what the virtual academy is offering.
So, and then going to the hybrid methodology, are we still proposing the every other day methodology? So cohort A comes in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, week 1, Tuesday, Thursday for week 2?
Yes.
Okay. I'll pause for now.
I think what Zeppi is pointing out is something that I was wondering about too, is that the proposed model of alternating days for students would result in basically rotating days when you actually have to be in school. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the first week, and then because it's rotating, Tuesday, Thursday, the second week. And so in essence, if you looked at a calendar on a page, you'd have like a checkerboard design of what days you need to be in school under the rotating schedule. So my concerns, I guess, about that are that why do that where then from week to week there isn't consistency and there's variability of when you actually need to be in school versus something where you go to school Monday, Wednesday, the other group goes to school Tuesday, Thursdays, and then maybe Friday is like an off day for everybody, something like that.
Well, Joe, I think Zeppi had mentioned, and I think it was a very good idea, and I had mentioned it also to Jim, to do a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Friday, maybe it's something that the whole class is on a Teams meeting. So then you have like the whole class at some point that is able to group together. I know, one of the concerns is then, if you did every other day, you'd be getting an additional in-school day, or I guess 2 additional in-school day per month, as opposed to if you did the Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, you're getting 2 less in-school days.
Right. And so I want to be careful here at this point that I don't want us to get into the point where
Right.
we're trying to on
Exactly.
the fly change Jim and the team's recommendation. I just want to better understand the
Mhm.
recommendation. So, and I know Jim is aware of the different variations on hybrid models that
Right.
districts all around are doing. They've chosen to recommend this alternating schedule with no like off day for everyone in a given week. So Jim and Gary, could you talk to us about the rationale for choosing that alternating day, which will result in kind of a checkerboard pattern of in-school attendance?
I'll start us off and I'll pass it to Gary. One of there is a model out there like Wednesdays off everybody or Friday versus every other day. We feel that the high school students, and we have some with us today who either confirm or not, we feel like they have memorized and figured out one of the most complicated schedules on the face of the planet as it is now. So this A-B idea and remembering if this Monday's A or this work is B, I'm pretty sure the students have got that. I'm pretty sure the parents may not. And, that is always part of the problem with the high school schedule. But we fully believe that the checkerboard is definitely going to happen and they've got it. They probably memorized it. We like the idea of or I should say, we didn't like the idea of having a day off for everybody because that's effectively 10% less instruction as the numbers work out face to face. And we're a little concerned about having that day off, and there could well be many days between the time when the students are actually there with their teacher, depending on how it falls or depending on things. So those are the reasons. The idea isn't at all wrong or bad. It's just that we preferred the every other day.
And I will confirm that my daughter, who just graduated from high school, had no problem knowing what day of the cycle, of the 6-day cycle it was, but I never had any idea.
So
That's the way she
Jim,
liked it, Joe. That's
in regards to that, are the students going to be on the day X schedule every day? Like, are they going to have every class every day? How's that going to look? You know, when they come in, are they going to have every class?
Yes.
You know how their schedules now are all over the place? On this day, they're block over here and they're block over here. And
Yes, and moving to the hybrid option, the high school is running an 8-period day. They're running the regular 8. All the courses are actually running on the day. And so those times have been shortened in order to make that happen to about 42, 43-minute classes, which, as you know, is shorter than the typical 55-minute and shorter than the 85-minute class. So, but it is 6 days though. It's every day they have those 43-minute classes as opposed to 4 days out of the 6. Jim had mentioned some of the reasons why we thought the alternating day was a better approach. One of the things is, for the teacher's perspective, they're going to view their planning in pairs. They're going to think about the live part with the class and then the asynchronous part that follows the next day. And it's that pairing that they're going to think about how to plan instruction. And so doing 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, and just continuing that pattern from a content planning perspective makes more sense. The other piece is, we did feel, as Jim already mentioned, that the community has really said we want as much synchronous instruction as we can do. And we thought the other proposal had as many as 4 days of a gap before the teacher sees the kids, and then it'd be 4 days before they see them again. Mm-hmm. And that distance, that gap, we thought was not building the connection, and we think there'd be a disconnect that would start happening, and we'd be fearful that stuff would start setting in that we had in the spring.
I have 2 things. One's a kind of common, one's a question. First, I can confirm what Dr. Crisfield said. I don't foresee a problem with the every other day, and I would prefer, like, the more time I can get in school with my teachers, the happier I would be. But then 2, I guess I'm a little bit concerned about it makes sense having all of our classes every day, just because if we're going to be switching off and on, but I am a little bit concerned, as all the student board reps earlier in the year, we were talking about the amount of nightly work that we had, and how we're staying up till hours that really aren't healthy doing our homework. And so I guess, and that was only with, like, I dropped 2 of my classes each day, and on some days I only had 4 classes. So I guess I'm concerned in some instances now, if the workload expectations for each class are the same as they were when we were in school normally last year, I'm really not going to have enough time to do that amount of homework for every single class every night. So how are we going to kind of manage those expectations to make sure that students have enough time to complete all their work?
Yeah, so Dr. Blair and I had a conversation about this way back in the spring. We anticipated this might be something that we'd have to really talk about with high school faculty, that with typically 4 out of 6 days of courses and homework associated with those classes, that's a lot different than 6 days, every day, all courses. So there will be some time gained and spread out over 6 days, but clearly there'll have to be an adjustment in terms of the homework expectations that are associated with the class spread over those days. So I hear your concern, and I don't think it would be reasonable to expect that you would maintain the same level of at-night work at home. And this is something Dr. Blair is aware of, and that will have to be a conversation with the faculty as they figure out how best to manage that so students are not overwhelmed.
Okay, thank you.
And if there's an issue with that, if a student notices that, you know, they're just getting inundated with homework, they would have to talk to their teachers or their principal. How are they going to handle that?
my suggestion would be they'd always talk with the teacher first and try to work out a solution there. If they need more support in having that conversation, counselors are there and available to them. But I know administration is certainly open to working with students all the time if those particular routes are not worked out, don't work it out first.
Okay, but Dr. Blair will be letting the faculty know to understand that each student is going to now have.
Yeah,
a
I mean,
day.
yeah, there has to be a conversation about the schedule in itself. Just the fact that we're going to 43 minutes means that things have to be chunked differently and assignments have to be given differently. And that does have to be worked out. Those are details the high school faculty will be working on with administration.
And I would say also at the middle school, you know, we would have to have a similar thought process, you know, and also consider a little bit more consistency from pod to pod. I know that there was a lot of variation between the different pods and in the amount of workload, et cetera. So I would say that that should also carry through at the middle school level.
Yes, just to say the middle school, though, at this point, they'll be running the same schedule that they have always been running. So the high school, it's a little different, 8 periods with the shorter time. Middle school will be running the same periods at basically the same times.
Then they will have a different schedule every day then.
Middle school students will have their 8 periods that they typically do. Then the next day they'll be out, you know, they'll be doing their
Right.
at-home piece, and then they come back and they have the 8 periods again, same courses.
So all same courses on each day.
Yes, I mean, some of them rotate, Zephy, in terms of their encore, their unified arts classes, they will rotate differently, yes. But they basically the same schedule is in place.
Right. So another couple of questions for the virtual academy. Will there be, I know we said that we were going to have caps for K through 6 on the virtual side, but what happens on the 7 through 12? Will there be caps in those classes? Because, you know, that will be asynchronous, but how do we ensure, you know, the teachers are not kind of overwhelmed, like if they have 50 or 60 students, or I mean, I don't know what a realistic number is. I'm just throwing hypothetical numbers here, but, you know, will their workload or will their kind of attention be fair in the virtual academy space as it is for the K through 6?
I can't tell you the ratio. I don't know that at this point, but I do know that the virtual academy also monitors that their teachers are working with a certain caseload that seems reasonable in a virtual setting. I don't know the answer to that one right now. But I will say that one of the things that has impressed me in my work with them over the past school year, they send to the counselor who sort of serves as our liaison with the academy, they send to us work performance reports fairly regularly, enabling our team to monitor that students are producing, they're producing the work, they're staying pace with where they need to be, and they're on target to do well in the course. And in those cases where there's any indication that work is not being produced, attendance is not showing that they're checking in each day and doing what they need to do, that's then followed up by our team to make sure that we get them back on track so they are successful in the program. So there's a good watching of the students going on and a monitoring of their work.
Okay, great. And then what happens if a student is in the hybrid option and then they have to be quarantined? Do they go to virtual academy or are they just doing their work from home like as if they were sick? Like how will we handle students that have to go out if they have to?
In our discussion on Monday, we had talked about the fact that the Teams option would be a good alternative there. Students would be getting the work through Schoology and be able to monitor their assignments. And also Teams would enable them to be involved in the class as best to maintain continuity of program. We did think about, and we could still send the students to the virtual academy for as short as 2 weeks or 3 weeks and pay for them to do that part of the program. But in our discussion with administration, faculty, and students who had weighed in on this. We also heard that there was a thought that maintaining consistency and continuity with the class was a better choice than actually going to a virtual academy and picking up 2 weeks of asynchronous classes trying to maintain pace. So at this point, I would think that we would use the Teams option.
That's great. And then I would assume kind of a similar thinking if we go to red, or we are, you know, we are ordered by some governing body to close our schools. We would not switch all those hybrid children into virtual academy, but just move methodology to MS Teams or something
Right.
along, you know, whatever appropriate platform is necessary.
Yeah, so Zephy, really glad you asked that question because that has come up over the course of the week from parents. So if a child is in the virtual option for K to 6, they have a Wissahickon teacher and they're working with them, and we go to red, those students will stay with the Wissahickon teacher with whom they've been working and do their remote teaching and learning with that teacher and with that class. So there's no need for them to be disrupted and then distributed back to the other classes in the schools. So that will be there. In the case of the virtual academy, grades 7 to 12, the students, parents who commit to that option on July 31st are committed to remain with that program through January, because that course, obviously they're enrolling, we're getting them situated in there, they're getting their schedules all adapted, and the expectation is they maintain there so they complete the course, get credit for the course, and then can continue in the spring. If they want to return to the brick and mortar, they can do so. If they want to continue in virtual in the academy, that option would be there as well.
No, but I think, Gary, so then the key though is for the students that are in the hybrid program, the standard program, 7 through 12, and then let's say September 15th, we go into the red zone and need to shut down. How does then that hybrid model for 7 through 12, what does that look like?
So so that brings up that other model. So what we would do is that students, we have a plan already devised where we have the middle school schedule outlined. Students would actually attend classes remotely from home on a daily basis, synchronously with their teacher, all their teachers. So if they're period 1, they go from 8 to 8:45, they're with that teacher on the computer. They start out with attendance with the start of the lesson. If they need to work on a task, the teacher might set them off to work on something, come back in 15, 20 minutes, check on them, put them in groups. All those different options are existing just like they do in the classroom, and the student would follow their regular school day with all the classes that they're normally assigned.
And then that's on the A day. So then on the next day, that would be primarily asynchronous. And so it'd be the alternating schedule again.
No,
live via Teams, and then asynchronous, live via Teams, asynchronous.
No, so the plan that we developed in the spring after school closed, we worked as a teaching and learning task force to develop a much more rigorous and responsive program for remote teaching and learning. And the way the program is laid out, we actually have synchronous. We have every day the teachers with their classes every day. So they would have their lessons on day 1, day 2, whatever their rotation is, that series of classes, they would have those and continue every day in a synchronous way.
But so how about the student experience? If we're in the hybrid 7th through 12th grade in the hybrid model and we go to red zone and we have to go 100% virtual, as a student, am I now looking at synchronous classes via Teams every single day? Or do I still have one day synchronous instruction and then the second day asynchronous?
You would have every day with the teacher, synchronous every day. And the teacher would be using those class periods much like they do with any day, where they're doing some things direct teaching, modeling, a whole class discussion. And there might be other parts of the class where the students are working independently on a task and the teacher's monitoring that work. So the teacher is live with the class every day. Attendance is taken, work is completed, class is wrapped up, class is dismissed. Students go to the next class in their schedule. So that would be every day.
My concern with that structure, though, it implies then for grade 7 through 12, if we go 100% virtual, a student then has to be logged in at their laptop for 6-7 hours. That's kind of what it sounds like. Is that correct?
It is, but what I would say that the the asynchronous work that a teacher plans for the asynchronous day and the hybrid are the things in a classroom that the teachers generally wouldn't be directly teaching. They might be practice, they may be working on a project. So even though the teacher would have the class live every day, students might be engaged in particular work that the teacher is having them go work on. So they're actually working on work, but they may not be on the screen at that point. So I would say that in that model, it's asynchronous and synchronous has been blended, but there's a daily accountability to meet with the teacher and to go over what the day's lesson is going to be.
Okay, I think I get it. I think what I'm getting is that although you are on with the teacher live, you might not be having to sit in front of the screen staring at the camera for 6-7 hours.
Exactly
There could be
correct.
periods of the lesson where you can then break away and work on this short essay or read this piece here or do something else. So you're like on, but you're not stuck staring at a camera for 6-7 hours.
That's right.
Okay.
Gary, could I ask you about the training that our teachers receive for online teaching or the virtual option? Are certain teachers differently prepared for online teaching, or?
So last spring, over the course of the spring, and again, I recognize that the spring experience from student perspective and community and even our educational perspective was not the robust for all the reasons we've talked about. But I would say that over the course of those months, we were able to teach our teachers a number of the strategies, tools, and platforms so they could begin to do the kind of teaching that they typically do in the classroom. Not perfectly exactly, but certainly able to do those things. As we move into the fall of this year, we know that our teachers need to be prepared to not only conduct a whole class session, as we're doing a meeting now with the whole group, listening and talking to one another, but we need to be able to put kids into groups, have kids work in small groups together, have them work on projects together, have them work independently, have them do things that engage students in the learning. Certainly a virtual experience in learning can be very bland and very boring. And we have to make sure that our students are engaged in what's happening and we're using strategies and tools to engage them. And that's part of our professional development continuing plan to make sure our teachers have the tools and the capabilities to do the kind of things we're expecting them to do. And that training and PD work needs to continue. It's not as though we can just give it on 2 days in August and expect they have everything. It's going to be an evolving, developing, and continuing support as teachers move along. And our instructional coaches are working on that plan and working to set up those sessions so they are able to be done as we move through the school year.
Gary, have we thought about front loading the professional development days? Having more in August so that the teachers are prepared for this virtual scenario, as opposed to spreading out the professional development days?
We feel as though that the PD work that we could do over a day and a half or two in the beginning is sufficient enough learning to give them the tools to get started. And what we know is as teachers did more synchronous learning in the spring, the more comfortable they became and the more willing and able they were to start venturing and trying some of the other strategies. So I think it's not like we can give all this learning up here and then expect them to instantly put it all into a place. It's kind of like here are some things to get started. So now let's introduce the idea of how to do breakout groups and sort of move along in that way. I think it's probably a sounder way to deliver the PD.
I have a question. If the schools are closed, if the governor closes the schools in the next few days, are we ready? Do we know what we're doing? Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, all the teachers, all the students?
The teachers will be getting the layout for the remote teaching and learning as it's been revised. That will be shared with them the week of the 27th, next week in July. That lays out the structure. The PD work is planned for August, which is our typical August days when the teachers return for the program. And we're prepared to deliver any PD that we need to do in a remote fashion if that needs to happen. We also have a fair number already of video tutorials associated with Teams that, and there's plenty of them out there, but we have those already available that teachers can be looking at now. Some of them, they're already on our website and people can find them. But would I like to start that way? No, but we certainly will gear up to do what we need to do and to deliver in that fashion if we need to.
Okay, thanks.
Mary, I have a question about, going back to Zephy's question about students that may need to quarantine. You mentioned that they would be able to participate on Teams. So that would mean the teacher in the classroom on the laptop has Teams open so the student can watch the class?
We may have a student, use the student's laptop to bring the student in, invite that way so the teacher's laptop is not being utilized there, and we can actually bring the student in as a participant in the class and have the teacher still working with all the things they're doing with the laptop to negotiate their lessons, their links, their videos, and their different platforms.
Okay, that was my concern. I wanted to make sure the teacher still had that technology. And on that same topic of the technology, we talked about at the last couple of meetings about having more classes outdoors. I heard some teachers express concerns about this, indicating that they won't have the access to the technology that they would have in the classroom if they're teaching outside. How are we dealing with that?
Well, I think that there are certainly limitations on what effective teaching can happen outside. I think we have to think about like where are the natural places that can happen. Certain classes, you're more able to maybe go outside and have a discussion. You're able to go outside and do some kind of a nature walk that's associated with what you're learning in your course. Other courses, not so easy. I mean, if you're doing a family consumer science class and you're cooking, that may not be the thing you need to be doing outdoors. You need the equipment and the supplies in the room. So I think it's the schools, each of the schools is going to have to think about where are the logical places where such breaks can happen, and where can learning take place outdoors that is associated with the course, or it can be done without distraction in the way it needs to be done. And of course, we'll only have that option as long as the weather holds. Once we get into the cooler weather and the winter and things of that sort, if we're going that long, certainly we will have to think of other options besides that to give the breaks and sort of take a break from the stuff, the masks and everything else.
Okay.
Gary,
Thank you.
I just, we're expecting the teachers to do an awful lot with, especially if we go virtual, with the technology. And I know you said, we have 2 PD days scheduled for August. And I know you don't want to move all of them up front, but do you think it would be an option maybe to poll the teachers and see if they would rather have like 1 or 2 more PD days built in the beginning, just to help them become, I guess, less nervous, more acclimated?
I don't know how much of an option we actually have in that regard. We have induction of our new staff who we've hired, plus the year 2 and 3, which is about 75 to 80 teachers that are coming in the week before they come in. So that's the week of August 17, 18, 19th, I believe. So induction's occurring there. Then the teachers come back and they're in for 3 days. And then we have the Labor Day weekend that comes in there. So I'm not sure how much time we actually would have if we could get agreement to do that, or if the union really wanted to do that. I'm not sure what our options would be in that regard. We'd have to look at that, I think, with Kathy and Jeff.
I think we could look at moving some of the other PD days over the course of the year up. I don't know that it necessarily had to be before school starts, but maybe a good approach would be to have one a month in after we've conducted ourselves for a while, got some lessons learned, figured out what might need some help, and then target that day to help it. I think that might be worth monitoring. Preloading all of them would I think hamstring us in our ability to react to things that we find out. But I like the idea of kind of maybe front loading, broadly speaking, rather than before school.
Right.
And Tracy, one of the nice things at the elementary level, at least, we are able to do some PD work at the beginning of the day, each day, in order to sort of take care of some of the demands that need to be done quickly because people need to know something that they are struggling with or whatever. So that happens pretty easily there. And we do some of that even at the middle school and high school over lunch breaks. There are times of the day when teachers can go and get a session with the staff developer. So they're available too to support as things are happening also. So not to think that people are in a lurch, they can't get help if they need it.
Gary, going back to the hybrid model, grades 7 through 12, and we have to go 100% virtual. By having classes every day, like you talked about, it seems that that eliminates one of the benefits I heard from many teachers about the hybrid AB model, was that in the hybrid AB model, the normal hybrid AB model, it allowed them to break up their class into 2 cohorts, which individually are much smaller. So it allowed them to have a much smaller group in person that they're doing their live lesson to each day, and they could do more things in the classroom and have a lot more flexibility. And a lot of teachers in many of the emails that I saw were very excited about that element of the hybrid AB model. If then we go to 100% virtual and trying to deliver that, and we have them meeting with classes every day, we would lose that positive element of the hybrid AB. Explain to me about like that trade-off there.
Yeah. So one of the things with the high school, with the model for them, we were going to use the alternate block days with the high school in the virtual model, the remote teaching and learning model. So in other words, on a given day, it'd be courses 1, 3, 5, and 7. And on the next day, it will be courses 2, 4, 6, and 8. And the advantage of doing that was we would be able to restore those classes to 80-minute classes and have much more time with the class to work with them. So in that particular model, teachers would have the opportunity also to break that class into groups and have groups doing certain things while the teacher may be working with a smaller subset. So that particular model, we really talked a long time about that in our planning for remote. We really felt as though it was a much better, more usual way of teaching for the high schooler as opposed to these short 43-minute classes every single day of the week. We felt that the doing the 4 blocks each day on an alternate, like, odds one day, evens the next, odds, etc., gave the teacher the latitude and the opportunity to do the kinds of things we're talking about, small group work, even though they have the whole class. But that is more natural to them. I also want to say that the survey in the spring made it very clear to us that our teachers made it very clear that the time it took to develop asynchronous lessons that were pre-recorded were far more time intensive and more demands on them in terms of the planning of them. And I'm hoping that in the more synchronous version, it will be far more natural for the teacher and more comfortable, and in effect, also deliver a much more seamless experience for students. I'm actually really pleased of the faculty's response to the need and understanding the need for more synchronous learning as we move forward, and the fact that we've got to advance learning. We have to keep things moving.
Okay.
So if we close the school, then it is not, the kids are in class every day, but it's not the 8 classes every day. It's
Right.
more spread out
Right.
like it normally is on their rosters right now.
Right, and then we're able to build in breaks between the big blocks, and we're able to build in the lunch piece, and all of that sort of is nicely laid out. It's a really nice schedule, and I think the staff and the principal feel really strong that that's the best way to do that part.
Thank you.
Okay.
That also helps alleviate the homework issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thanks. This was very helpful from an academic perspective, but I do want to switch gears a little bit and kind of look at the safety piece for a moment. Firstly, it would behoove me if I didn't say thank you to the hundreds of folks who've reached out to us via email, text, etc. But safety is, something that came up a lot from both from students and from the parents.
And teachers.
And the teachers, sorry,
Mhm.
that's what I meant to say. Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to start with one theme that I saw a lot of. There are several classrooms that are interior classrooms, therefore have no windows, and therefore may have perhaps less, ventilation opportunities. Are we thinking at all of, I'm hypothesizing many things here. And I know until we know how people are deciding, it's really hard to kind of really gauge these things. But in the event we do have a decrease of people in the building, can we use more of those classrooms that have windows? Can we rethink how we're putting teachers and therefore students in rooms that we feel are appropriate? First
Yeah.
question.
The answer is yes.
Great. And then the sanitizing, I felt like we touched on this very lightly. I know Marshall kind of brought it up on Monday, but it wasn't very clear. Like in elementary school, I feel like the kids go to a classroom and plus minus can stay in that classroom for a bulk of the day. Once we get into 6th grade, kids move around throughout the building throughout the day. And I know we talked about putting arrows and having hallways one way, but what happens when they come to the classroom and they sit down at a desk? Who's wiping down the desk? Is that the teacher's responsibility, the student's responsibility, or custodians coming through at the end of every period? I mean, what is that going to look like?
I think, Wade, did you answer this one the other night? Would you mind weighing in here?
Sure. I think actually, Zephy, you hit a combination. So we are planning to have a jug bottle of disinfectant, a squirt bottle of disinfectant and wipes available. It'll be near the teacher's desk. So if a student individually wants to clean up their desk, they would have the ability to. At the teacher's desk as well, we're going to have one of those big hand washing, jugs available for students to wash their hands. And we are going to have custodians who are going to be going through the building and hitting high touch spaces like doorknobs and things like that. But what we are not going to be able to promise to do, because it's just not feasible, is to have a custodian come between every period and clean desks. It's just not going to be done. We are hopeful that as we go through our rotations, that we're moving people from sort of a night to a day and increasing hours for folk and doing things like that. But realistically, again, there's just too many classrooms to hit every single room, but we are going to have people rotating through during the day. And I've already talked to the principal of the middle school and high school, and we've been given permission to sort of try to invisibly go into a classroom and, without disrupting what's going on, clean high surface areas, and if we can, anything that needs to be cleaned, including desks. But between the periods, it's just not feasible based on all the numbers that I'm sure you're adding up in your head, and I've done as well.
I'm totally aware. I know this is semantics and mechanics, but I almost feel like you need to have like wipes attached at the door as you're walking in, and everybody takes a wipe as they're walking into the door. But I'll leave it to your great staff to think through the mechanics of it. But let's try to think through like, what's the bottlenecks going to look like? Let's make sure that people aren't trying to use the same thing like at the same moment. So let's just be thoughtful as to how we're actually expecting things to happen.
Okay.
And then lastly is the masks. And, Ronnie brought up a lot of good points earlier. And in this time, I actually went in and pulled up our dress code handbook for the middle school. And in it on page 26, it says, and of course this is about clothing, but I don't see how masks, I can see how masks can fall into this. Choices of apparel preferred by students. The school reserves the right to enforce rules for clothing to create a healthy, focused school community. And just based on that statement, and I clearly don't understand the legal issues that, Dr. Wolf has put in his statements, but I do feel that we have language that gives the school the right to enforce certain rules. I would find it we should be able to work with our governing bodies. I don't know if this is something we need to bring up with Val Arkush or others within the government to help with us to reinforce something, because mask wearing is kind of a tough one for us to make it a like wishy-washy option. I think we need to really kind of work with our governing bodies to figure out a way to make sure that we have our students and our teachers and our administrators and our support staff safe at all times we possibly can. So I do urge that we kind of look that and try to find a better solution for that.
I like the thinking on dress code. I will have to ascertain if our local student code of conduct can trump the governor's orders or not. And sort of where you were going, if it can't, then maybe we work to get those orders adjusted or somehow more favorable to us. And we'll definitely do that. Right now, I wouldn't want people to leave this meeting though thinking that our code of conduct governs. It quite probably does not.
Well, Jeff is on the call. Would he know?
I don't think he is actually.
Yeah, yes, he's here.
Joined.
He snuck in.
Okay, I snuck in. Okay, your question is?
Jeff, our code of conduct has a provision where we can enforce certain rules about safety in clothes. Let's just say open-ended shoes or things like this. Can that be applied, or can that be taken to require the use of face coverings?
Well, first of all, the use of face coverings is mandated by the governor. It is the law. The only issue that exists right now, and it's not for us to make up the law, is the extent to which people can take advantage of an exception.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And the general rule is nobody gets an exception without some form of medical excuse. And we would have to address, with respect to students who have special needs, on a case-by-case basis. It may be something that would be related to their IEP development and the like. And with respect to an employee, it would be just like any other kind of disability, and that's covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we have to have a required discussion and an interactive discussion with the employee. We, as a district, intend to enforce the mask order to the extent possible under the law. So I don't know if that should occupy or preoccupy a lot of debate on the health and safety plan. The administration's pledged to do what it can do to enforce the mask mandate.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, before you came on board, Jim was playing out a scenario where he was describing that you can be exempted from wearing a mask if there's a medical concern or whatever, but he was saying that we don't have the ability necessarily to verify or validate or prove that medical concern if people claim it.
That has changed under recent regulation as of last Friday. So
okay, that's great.
The state reversed itself on that initial finding and does allow elements of verification, because the state came up with a rule that was directly contrary with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a federal law. So right now there are verification mechanisms that we can employ based upon state regulations. And while I respect the overall concern of the community and the board on that issue, we have some additional tools that are now available that were not available as of last Friday.
That's great to hear, because I was also very concerned and troubled to hear that our ability to enforce mask wearing might be limited. But I'm glad to hear the latest update from you, Jeff, on this.
And that's not to say that we won't have conflict with individuals, because masks have become as much a medical as it is a politicized issue right now. But we will address that issue, and I will work I pledge to work with your administration to enforce that to the extent possible, since I realize that until we have a vaccine, until we have other prophylactic measures, from what I know scientifically, it's our best antidote to prevent spread of the disease.
Agreed. Thanks for clarifying.
I have to say that there's a website, the Universal Face Covering Order, educationpa.gov, that states that a student that does not wear a mask due to a medical condition should have that in their IEP or 504.
Right.
So is that what we'll do?
And that's how we're going to address that issue. And a student who may have a no mask in their IEP would potentially be eligible for a face shield. And typically, and very often, students who have special needs are in smaller class environments, so social distancing is easier to accomplish than in other kinds of environment. We're going to be very sensitive to that issue, but as a general principle, the state did exercise leadership in passing the mask order, because until that time, that was a district by district mandate.
Great. Thank you.
Jim,
Yes.
I know we had talked the other day about doing some kind of like a little video clip of the different schools and just giving the parents an idea of what a classroom is going to look like virtually, separated, or not virtually, but socially distanced. And then I believe you said that the principals are all sending out what their cleaning plans are. But if we could get something together, because I think it would help the parents make their decision of knowing what the kid's classroom is going to look like, knowing what their kid is going to be seeing and where they're going to be situated every day, what the lunchrooms are going to look like, if we're going to, be taping off seats like I've seen in some of the restaurants, there's tape everywhere and you're not allowed to sit in certain seats and those types of things. So can we do something like that so that the parents would have an idea of what the school is going to look like before they make this decision?
Yes, the principals have all been made aware that they have to communicate extensively over the next 9 days to give as comprehensive a picture as they can. I did not require them to do a video, but I am requiring them to reach out multiple times in multiple fashions to get any questions that they're out there answered.
Okay.
Maybe they can also do a Zoom, or, like, instead of doing back to school, because we probably can't do that in real life, maybe we can have that offered up in a virtual way so that people can hear it and also have an opportunity to do Q&A.
I'm going to leave it to the principal's discretion how to best communicate, but they've been told that all questions and all questions will be answered, all details need to be conveyed.
Can I say something here? We are plunging very deep into the weeds here. And we're basically doing our superintendent's job, or trying to. Why don't we do what generally our job is, to set policy, vote on this up or down on this plan, and then expect our administrative staff to carry out that plan in the most efficacious method. And if we find problems afterward, then we go after them and hunt them down and cause them all kinds of grief if they do the wrong, if they make mistakes. But to try to come up with every single point in one meeting, it's not going to be, we're not going to finish it before the sun comes up tomorrow morning.
Well, Ron, the problem is that the questions that we're asking, well, first, let me just clarify some of the parents, because we were getting emails also saying the board must not know what's happening because they're asking all of these questions. But the reason that we're asking these questions is because we can't have behind the scenes meeting, asking these questions and finding out all this information ahead of time because of sunshine laws. So when we come to this meeting, the object is to ask the questions that the parents, that we think maybe the parents would be wanting to know, to make sure that they can make an informed decision on the 31st when they have to decide which way they want to send their child to school.
Or the questions we're getting
The
from
problem
parents.
is, we've been spending 2 hours
So
on all of those questions. That's-
Ron, with all due
into the
respect,
wood.
Ron, with all due respect, we're in a very different environment today. None of us have been in a pandemic. We all are trying to understand what the reality looks like. And unfortunately, the devil's in the details because our parents, our community, our teachers, our students want to know these things. And yeah, I'm not trying to do Jim's job. He has a great job and is doing it, but it's my job to make sure my community feels assured that they have all the information because July 31st is 9 days away. So sorry, Ron, this is important for everybody to hear.
what I will say is that what I've appreciated tonight is that the discussion that we've had is primarily being focused around better understanding the administration's rationale and the reasons why they're recommending what they're recommending. Versus Monday, I think we got down a rabbit hole of trying to dictate and tell them how to do what they need to do. So I think Ron's point generally, I think, is well taken, but I also think that the vast majority of the questions in the discussion tonight have been along the lines of better understanding the actual plan and how it'll be implemented, as opposed to telling them how it should be implemented. And I think understanding the plan and some of these details as board members is important for us to feel comfortable with however way we want to vote tonight. But with that being said, that's a pretty good segue, is that we talked a lot about the nature of the plan, the rationale and the reasons behind the recommendations in the plan. At this point, are there additional questions or clarifications for Jim and the team? Amy?
Yes, I have one more question. It seemed to be on the lines of safety, a question that came up in a lot of the emails I received from parents, as well as discussions I had with parents about why it's not practical to do temperature checks. It's something that happens if you go to the dentist, if you go to the eye doctor, if you have your kids at camp. Everywhere you go now, you get your temperature checked. And a lot of parents are saying, the homeroom teacher, or in K through 5, the teacher, your teacher could just have one of those temperature guns and go through in the morning and check everybody's temperature. It seems to be one of the main ways we're checking for symptoms. So a lot of parents want to know, why can't we implement that simple act every day of just checking temperatures? I understand gathering in large spaces at the door, checking everybody's temperature is impractical, but why not in the homeroom setting in the morning?
If I may, on that issue, I was in a statewide committee addressing that very issue. And the prevailing view right now, educationally, is that temperature testing is not the most effective way to address the issue. And I'm sure the administration here will supplement that, but I'll give you the arguments and the rationale for that. First of all, in my firm, if I go back to my office, I have to be temperature tested. I get that. There are substantive differences for a school district, though, on the issue, and there's substantive differences on the population we serve. First of all, the doctors and epidemiologists are saying that most children do not exhibit the traditional adult symptoms of temperature when they contract COVID-19. By and large, they are asymptomatic. And the problem is that if you go ahead and do temperature testing, we have to do it at the points of entry into the educational system. Our first point of entry will be on our buses for many students who aren't transported by their parents. And we would have to work with First Student to do that, and it would substantially slow down the transportation of students into school. And secondly, raises all kinds of issues if the bus company temperature tests upon entry and the child's parent is not there and the child tests with a temperature, then where do you take the child? You bring the child onto the bus, take them to school, and then expose him or her to the rest of the bus becomes an issue. And the last major reason why most districts have elected not to do that is that then there would be a delay in entering the building where students would congregate. Social distancing would become difficult in terms of the daily temperature test before they gain entry into the building.
So I think, Jeff, you
Yeah,
still
which
there?
is why I know, which is why most districts have elected not to go that route. But I'm just raising those are the arguments. I don't know if Jim or Gary or anybody else can supplement that.
No, I think you put it perfectly, and the bus piece is the hardest one that I can't get past. And I know we're going to have fewer students on the bus this year, but there still will be substantial numbers. And so the false security of I think not entirely false, but I would be worried about false security of a temperature check at the school before, and then the whole bus is already exposed.
But, okay, so if we were to not take anybody's temperature and they have a fever, then we're allowing them to go from 8 or 7:25 in the morning to 3 or 2:30 in the afternoon, all through the school day, infecting everybody. But if we were to actually do their temperature checks, at least in homeroom, then we are limiting the number by at least 2/3 of the people that they're going to come in contact with.
If they're
And
not
again, two things I will say is that the health department guidance and all the guidance saying that you need to do it at the point of entry. So doing it in the homeroom, you're past the point of entry. It's kind of like the horses left the
I'm just
barn.
saying, if we don't want to,
but
but
the
you're
other thing
saying
too-
let's not do it at all since we can't do point of
But the
entry.
other thing too is that also we have masks and social distancing in place as well. So even if they do have a fever, there are other measures in place that would also help contain any possible spread.
Joe, if I may.
Yeah.
You just made a comment that sort of struck with me that we have some things in place to try and alleviate some of these issues. And I can't get out of my mind over all of these discussions that we had over the last few weeks that we cannot live in a vacuum. And I feel like we're living in a vacuum. What we're trying to do with this exercise is come up with the best educational possibility. But we're not doing it simply because we want to come up with a new learning methodology. We're doing this because there is a pandemic. And I keep hearing terminology like wiggle room, or we're not going to be able to necessarily have the social distancing that is recommended, especially in our elementary schools. Or we're going to do our best with regard to masks, but it may not be 100% or foolproof. And our children don't necessarily exhibit symptoms. And yet the 9 of us are charged with voting for all of the people watching to send their children into that environment when we won't ourselves walk into those buildings. We have been getting inundated with emails and texts and phone calls in a good way because everybody's concerned. And the problem is people are scared. They're afraid and they're scared because they don't know what's going to happen. And we have to make a decision for them to send them back. So I am very concerned that while we're trying to put together the best educational plan in place, what we're not necessarily focusing on is the best safe plan in place. And I don't know how we reconcile that with what we have heard. I voted down the measure Monday night because I didn't believe at the time that we had the safest plan in place. And I haven't heard anything tonight that changes that. The educational plan seems very nice. And in any given situation, maybe it would be great. But we have a problem here because people have to make a decision, and then our teachers are going to make a decision. And from all the emails we've seen, they're very worried and concerned, and that could change the dynamic, and that could change whether we go back to school on August 31st. And it's making our job difficult, which that's what we took on. But I don't know how in good conscience we can vote, and I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote one way or the other. We're voting not for my own child, but for everybody here to vote to put them back in class when we can't allay those nervous feelings and everything that goes along with it. And I haven't heard a way that we are going to get around that. I've heard a bunch of things tonight that we may be going virtual at some point. You know, again, whether it's popular or not, whether it's the right decision or not, maybe we need to say, you know, that's the route we have to go, because otherwise we can't guarantee we're going to get those staff and those kids home safely every afternoon, because we don't know who's going to be exhibiting symptoms. We don't know what teachers are going to be feeling in the classroom, because they're going to be anxious, having to worry that if somebody has a cough or a sneeze, do they have some sort of virus or illness, or whatever they may encounter. You're putting them in an impossible position. And we're asking parents to do something that we wouldn't do in any other circumstance. I know we're allowed to do it. The question is it the right thing to do? So I think all these questions are good questions. But again, I don't know we're at the point that we shouldn't say, why don't we, at the very least, take safety first and only when we can make sure that we send everybody home safely, that we put these plans in place.
That was the point of my email to everyone yesterday. Like, safety and health are first, before education, before anything else. And I agree. How are we going to make sure everyone is safe?
What I would say is that we are definitely in a difficult position. I would, in some would argue, an impossible position. There is no way we will make everyone happy. Any option we go with, any path we take, will make people angry and upset. And that's unfortunately the way it is. What I wanted us to do is hear from Gary and Jim and the rest of the team what they recommend for school reopening in the fall. Given all the health information, all the educational concerns and goals, given all the different opinions throughout the community, all over the spectrum, taking all that into consideration, what would they recommend? What do they think is the best balance of health and safety, as well as educational quality? Present that to us, make sure we understand it, and then we vote on whether or not we agree. That's what it's down to. In terms of us mandating or forcing students back in school, I disagree with that. We're not forcing anyone to go back to school. Everyone has the option to go 100% virtual if that is their priority. Again, they might not like the 100% virtual option that's being presented, but there is an option and it's their choice. We are not forcing anyone to go in person if they do not feel comfortable doing so. So we'll never have perfect information. We'll never have ultimate certainty. We will never eliminate risk completely, but we have to make a decision. And again, Jim has presented a plan that balances a lot of these competing concerns, and he's putting it forward to us to vote up or down. And I think that's our task, and that's what we need to do, even though we don't like to do it. I'm not happy about doing it, but I know that it's our duty to do it. And yeah, for me personally, I support the plan as presented, in spite of some of the gray areas, in spite of some of the uncertainties, because I think overall and conceptually, it does a decent job of balancing health and safety with educational quality for our kids. It provides some options for parents who are not comfortable with sending their kids in person at all. My reason for voting no on Monday, just to clarify for some folks, was primarily because I did not agree at all with adding a synchronous live stream option to the district's plan, because I just don't believe that was something that was appropriate. So it was not part of his original plan. I thought it was inappropriate for trying to like tack it on during Monday. And what Jim is presenting here, it is not a part of the plan, although it sounds like it may be an option in exception cases if we have individual students that have to quarantine, we might activate a team session so they could at least have some view into the classroom. But that is not part of the model that people can choose by choice or discretion. Anyway, I just went on a long soliloquy. I apologize for that. It's been a long meeting. We've had a lot of discussion. If there are additional questions or clarification.
I know you were, with what you were just saying, we're not forcing the students to come into the school, they have the virtual option. Are we forcing teachers to come in?
Teachers, I guess, have a choice if they have a medical issue or some kind of objection, that they can make a choice to not come into work.
But let me try to answer the question. I'm actually speaking about that issue tomorrow to the 4 county IUs on the subject. As a matter of law, teachers can't say that they don't want to come to work because they're fearful of the consequences. In much the same way as our healthcare personnel working for a hospital can't say to a hospital, we don't want to come in because of the high incidence of COVID-19. They don't have that option. If they do have a medical basis for that, they have the right to invoke the provisions of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we will deal with that issue. But we can't simply operate under the premise that somebody gives a generalized fear that they may be exposed to something. And I understand that that doesn't sound very sensitive or kind or understanding, but it's a reality. We can't deliver an educational program if the people who are delivering the educational program are expressing that fear. What we can do is try to offer as safe a programmatic situation as possible and address it that way. But if we have a situation where 40 teachers don't show up to work because they just decide that they don't want to show up to work, we're going to have to review our disciplinary procedures and address that. It's a difficult situation, but if we're going to operate school, we can't leave it up to those kinds of issues. I know I said something that it's very unpopular and the like, but it's a reality of the kinds of difficult decisions that we're forced to make under this circumstance. If we allow individuals to make individual determinations as to whether they show up or they don't show up, I don't know how we deliver any kind of educational program.
How about if there are medical notes? Are teachers then not forced to go in?
Pardon me, if they are validly based medical notes, and we have, it's not just enough to have a medical note, we then have to invoke an interactive discussion to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act to attest to the veracity. So for example, if I have a medical note that says that my spouse has a condition, under the law, the fact that your spouse has a condition is not the basis under the Americans with Disabilities Act not to show up to work. And you might have difficult choices to make under the circumstances. So
That makes
yes,
sense.
pardon me.
If your spouse has the virus, that's a whole different story, obviously.
Yeah, obviously that's a different story, and we're going to be governed by what the Montgomery County Department of Health and the Pennsylvania Department of Health would do in terms of physical quarantine under those circumstances. And if we have better testing and contact tracing, we'll have to address those particular issues. But I'm merely addressing the situation where somebody says, I have a generalized anxiety about reporting to work because of my feeling that I may not be safe under the circumstances. That isn't enough for us to excuse that as an absence, in much the same way that we wouldn't excuse a student absence under a generalized fear either.
are we maybe, as a thought, maybe we, the notion of what could or could happen to teachers are pretty sensitive, and maybe it's gearing us off course here a little bit, in the sense that we're just trying to figure out what our opening plan is. And I think these are extremely important topics, and we'll deal with them. I would inject some layers of sensitivity to things, being fully respectful of the law at all times, of course. But in any event, we're, I mean, some of that is out of our hands at this point. This is really just a matter of what we're doing with our schools.
Right, I agree with Jim. The letter of the law would be, when you consider the age group of many of our teachers, and would be disastrous for some of them if they catch something in school, or and they bring it home to their family. We should accommodate them as much as possible, and if necessary, those kinds of teachers would be the ones who staff our virtual academies.
But that's part of the interactive discussion that you need to have with each employee and address their particular needs and concerns. But there will only be so many virtual slots. That's the practical difficulty. And when we run out of virtual slots, then how are we going to operate our face-to-face programming for those people who have opted for that? That's the inherent difficulty that we're faced with. And as I tell Jim on a regular basis, I'd rather be the district's counsel than the district superintendent in making those kinds of decisions right now. Those are the difficult decisions that need to be made if we're going to operate any form of educational program.
And at the end of the day, if it turns out that, even assuming the hybrid plan that Jim and team are recommending, assuming it does have majority support of the board, it all goes out the window if it turns out the first day of school, we don't have enough teachers available to actually work. And then we'll deal with that as it comes. But we've talked about the provisions of, if we need to, through government order, or in this scenario, through lack of teachers, have to go fully virtual, we can do that. And we have an approach to doing that. So, I mean, I think that's already a component of the plan that's in place.
So can I just say, we were on a meeting with 307 teachers and staff members today. And honestly, our teaching staff is not looking for a way to get out of working. They want to come to work. They want to teach kids. And I really just feel like I need to stand up for them to say that they want to be at work. And I am not getting any of those kinds of, I just don't want to work scenarios. And they've been kind, they've been helpful, they've been giving me lots of feedback and information, and the interactive process is working. And I feel like we're going to be okay with our teaching staff. They're strong, they're dedicated people.
Right, we owe them as safe and a working situation as possible. And that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If I may.
Sure.
So if this plan gets turned down tonight, do we go fully virtual, or is there a new plan set up? I'm just a little confused as to what's going to happen.
What we have in front of us is whether or not we approve the plan that Jim and the team are proposing. If it's not approved, we don't have an approved plan, period.
Okay.
And then if we come to that point, then we'll talk about what else.
Okay. Thank you.
Paige raises a good point, though. We'll also keep in mind we're voting on two plans. One is for the state and one is internal. So it is important to differentiate it. If that is the case, what happens if we...
Paul, that's actually not the case. The health and safety plan that we have to submit to PDE, that document, that was approved by a vote of 5-4 on Monday. The piece that was voted down, 4 yeses and 5 nos, was the fall reopening options that we've been discussing. So the actual document, because the document we submit to the state was more general in nature. And it was more along the lines of, are you going to have a blended opening, or what are you doing, in some general testimony about how you're going to deal with safety regulations and so forth. The more detailed version, like, is it going to be hybrid, and what type of hybrid, live streaming or not, that sort of stuff, that's the document that was voted down last night. And that's the one that we've been discussing once again tonight here. And that's
Right,
the only
okay.
thing that we're voting on.
Right, and to be clear, the agenda had an addition. Since this was the same meeting, we just added the item and sent it out to everybody, 7B4, which is really basically this 7B3 restated. The document per document 7-4 is the same exact document, but we needed to point out that we're voting it on tonight at the recess from last Monday.
Okay, any additional questions, comments about the plan?
So I want to thank everybody for their patience. I know this has been exhausting for all of us, me included, and our administrators included. I read every single email that came in. I'm sure my colleagues have as well. And I will tell you that based on the emails I read, there is no way we can make every single person in this community 100% happy. I do feel that we've made a lot of progress tonight, and I hear that our administrators will continue to do more progress, which makes me feel better. It's not 100%, but I do feel a lot better where we are landing tonight. And I just want to say sincerely thank you to everybody who has hung in there with us throughout. I will vote yes, mostly because I feel our administrators need to start planning, because we need to know how many people are coming in versus virtual versus, how are we going to situate our buildings? How are we going to situate our transportation? And I know Jim and Wade and Kathy and Gary need that information sooner than later so that they can appropriately plan. What I do ask of you, Jim, is that we continue to have continuous touch points to our community from our principals, as you've promised, to kind of keep everyone informed and help them understand things as much as possible. So thank you, everybody, for that.
Yeah, I also wanted to say, as Zephy pointed out, we received probably hundreds of emails, maybe not hundreds, but along those lines. Along those lines. And I tried to respond to a lot of them. If they came today, I probably didn't get a chance to respond just because of the time constraints, but I wanted to thank everybody for voicing their opinions. It's appreciated from, teachers to parents to students. It helps us in making these decisions too. Like Zephy said, we are never going to make 100% of the people happy, but even way back when I was the PTO president at Bluebell, that was one of the things that we used to say. We are never going to make 100% of a school community happy with a decision that you make. We just have to try and be safe and offer a very good education and try to do the best that we can. And I just wanted to thank everybody that has been involved. This has been some long, very, very long nights. And I thank all of the people that are on these meetings, listening to us talk for 3.5 hours. I wanted to thank our student board reps once again showing up on their summer vacation to participate in this and give us some valuable input. We really appreciate it. And that's all that I wanted to say.
Paul?
No, I had nothing further at this point.
Oh, okay.
I agree with what's been stated.
All right. Yeah, I just saw your window got highlighted, so I thought you were going to say something. Well, again, we've had a lot of discussion. We said a lot of words. Are we at the point where we can take a vote? Okay, well, hearing no big
I would say
objections.
yes.
Okay, hearing no big objections, then I will ask for a motion to approve action item 7B4, which is approval of the revised, pretty much the same, fall reopening teaching and learning plan per document 7.4 that we've been discussing tonight.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any additional comments, questions? Katie, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Yes. Mr. Badger,
Yes.
Mr. Bleefeld,
No.
Mr. Frank,
Yes.
Mrs. Ginsburg,
No.
Mrs. Heyman,
No.
Mrs. Karianakis,
Yes.
Mr. Stoloff,
Yes.
Mrs. Walsh,
You're on mute, Tracy.
Yes.
Mr. Antonio.
Yes.
Six yes, 3 no.
Okay, the motion passes. Whew, okay. I'm kind of dumbfounded at this point, but again, thank you for everyone who's been involved on especially on the administration side, doing the vetting and the due diligence to put together this recommendation for us and answering our questions. Thank you to the board reps, and everyone who's been on this call. We spent a lot of hours on Zoom, as well as I think separately and apart, thinking through a lot of these issues, and I appreciate everyone, sticking it out with us. Also, thank you to everyone who's been watching on the Zoom call or on YouTube Live. I know this is an important topic for everyone, and as board members, we're just trying to do right by the community and make the best decisions that we can with the information we have available to us, and recognizing we won't make everyone happy. I think at the end of the day, what we want to do is at a very minimum, do what we think is right and best for the most people in our community. So thank you for the time and energy, and I'm so thankful that we actually got a positive vote and can move forward at this point. Any other comments? Final words? I think we've said all a lot. Oh, Paige, you want to say something?
Yeah, really quickly. I think obviously a lot was discussed tonight, and I'm not quite sure what the next steps are going to be, but I think that we definitely need to release something that kind of has some sort of a plan, because I know that there's a lot of confusion out there still. Even, sometimes it's still hard to follow, and I'm right on the meeting myself. So I think that that's definitely something that should be released soon, especially because parents are going to have to make the decision soon.
And Jim, I believe you said that you have documents queued up to distribute far and wide to all parents with more specific information about the options that are available to them and the choice they have to make.
Yes, that is correct. We have building specific documents that will answer questions, and then there will be communications going out regarding how to make a choice, and an opportunity to ask and answer more questions of the principals by the 31st.
And if we could just make sure, I know you're not, asking the principals to do these videos, but if they want to do them, tell them feel free. But if we could just make sure that the information that does go out to the parents gives them a sense of what they are actually picking if they pick the hybrid. They need to know what the classrooms are going to look like, because how do you make that decision if you think it's going to look one way and then you pick it and then your child goes in and it's really not what you thought it was going to be?
Agreed.
And with that said, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you,
good night.
everyone, for
Thank you.
attending.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you.